Well, if I were to explain international human rights, or the human rights discourse is the way that I like to call the framework in regards to my project, it's very important. But I have to say that I don't necessarily adopt the human rights discourse framework. I problematize it, which means that I engage with it and I try to see what are the advantages and the disadvantages in using it. The starting point would be that we can consider the right to social security in international documents or international covenants recognized at the international level. But at the same time, it's it's difficult because if we consider conditional cash transfers themselves, we can say that they violate basic principles, which is we cannot condition human rights. They're supposed to be indivisible and universal to begin with. So in a way, it will go against the very nature of human rights themselves. So this idea parts from the understanding that human rights are indivisible, that they cannot be conditioned, that we cannot give as social constructs. If we understand human rights as social and political constructs, cannot give human rights to people under certain conditions. We cannot, for example, negotiate the right to life or the right to liberty. They're supposed to be universal, they're supposed to be non-discriminatory, or at least their access is supposed to be non-discriminatory, and they're supposed to be indivisible. So if we are saying that we're conditioning your right to social security, or anyone's right to social security, to certain conditions, in a way it's contradictory to the principles of international recognized principles of human rights, or what we understand as the property of human rights. Now, it's difficult because not everyone recognizes the right to social security as a human right, though for me it's very clear that it is. It's the right to dignity, is the right to life, in a way, to, for example, proper housing, or decent living standard. So that's to begin with. That's my approach to the right to social security. At the same time, we know that those rights that have more economic connotations tend to be less popular than those rights that have a sort of civil or political connotation. So that parts from that understanding as well, right? That we tend to position or to give more importance to civil and political rights, or to so-called recognition, recognizing certain rights, or, for example, rights related to identity and non-discrimination, rather than focusing on redistribution, rather than focusing on how the resources in our society, how the wealth is being redistributed. And those rights tend to be a little bit more controversial because we don't live in necessarily, social or extremely socialist societies. So wealth redistribution, it's a controversial issue, and it's not as popular as talking about civil and political rights. It's not as popular than talking about recognizing, for example, women's rights not to be discriminated. So in this area, I bring Nancy Fraser, who focus on this dilemma between recognition and redistribution. And this is when we're talking about the feminist debate, right? Or the feminist struggle. It's not enough to just focus on recognition. It's not enough to focus on identity of, we could be talking about women, or we could be talking about minorities, or groups that are marginalized or have been historically discriminated against. We need to start thinking about redistribution. We need to start thinking about how the resources in our society are being split and shared. And that's a little bit more difficult. I think that sort of requires reimagining the ways that in which we are organizing our societies. It's also a very controversial issue because we're dealing, in the context of a capitalist neoliberal environment, where people feel that you need to sort of work for what you own, that you need to show. I doesn't consider equality from the substantial basis, that focuses more on formal equality, rather than focusing on what are the circumstances and the conditions upon which people need to flourish or need to strive or need to just struggle. So there is this general understanding that the poor need to prove that they are deserving. This is the understanding of the deserving versus the undeserving poor. And it means that under the current neoliberal environment, we're expecting humans to be rational, to be responsible citizens who can lift themselves up, to pull themselves from the bootstraps and go out and work and prove that actually deserving of resources. They're actually deserving of the state's help.